Hello and welcome to Trad Jazz Today. Dan Zeilinger has been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of his most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at the Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. Dan has met many people during his career and has spent many hours on and off stage with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. They all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, Dan will be sharing them with you. Now, Dan Zeilinger.
Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Tradjaz Today. My next guest is an amazing tenor banjo player who's made a lot of his living on string bass. Oh, I haven't figured it out yet, and that's what I'm here to find out what's going on. We have a lot of friends in common, and all the way from Texas here's Mr. Tyler Jackson. Hey, Tyler.
How's it going? Nice to meet you.
Sure to moderate with a chance of showers today, but no, just you'll find out that I'm very silly and very ADD. So the combination of those things makes for just a dandy interview.
That's great.
But what can I say? So let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born, sir?
Yeah, I was born right here in Texas, actually, kind of near the Houston area. And,
well, to say something very pedantic, I'm surprised you don't have a stronger Texan accent.
well, I guess when you tour around, I travel a lot. I guess you don't get the Texan accent as much as most people that stay around
Well,
here.
I'm not being critical. It just, you talk to people, and then you have people like Sonny Leyland who you expect to have a Texas accent, and he doesn't. You find out he's from England. So
Right.
what's going on in the world is what I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I've been fortunate though. I mean, been playing a lot of music lately and been teaching a lot, and it's been good. It's been really good.
When did you start your musical journey? Was it in school?
So I was homeschooled until high school, and I was in a choir, a boys' choir, and found out quickly that, as my voice was changing, I couldn't sing high soprano forever. So I thought I'd get into sports and thought maybe music isn't for me. I tried to play the guitar a little bit, and it was hard at first. So luckily I ran into a guy named Buddy Griffin who taught these elective classes that we had through our church, actually. And we had all kinds of things. We would do like this big homeschool co-op group where we could take foreign languages and cooking classes and advanced math and chemistry and music, of course. So for a while, the only option was recorder. And I wasn't into that.
Song flutes for all of us, yes.
Right, yeah. I said, I'm going to avoid this like the plague. And finally, I had to take a music credit. And Buddy Griffin had just been hired, and he's an amazing ukulele player, tenor banjo player. So he started a ukulele class, and I signed up for that. I said, hey, that can't be too bad. It's sort of like a mini guitar, maybe the girls will like it.
Well, as you know, ukulele used to be a giant chick magnet back in the 20s and 30s.
In the 20s and 30s, exactly, yep. So I took ukulele lessons with him in a large format class, and after the 8 weeks were over, he came up to me and said, you've got some talent. You have a good ear. And he said, if you want to learn something bigger, let me know. And I said, what do you got? And he had a banjo, a bass, and all that stuff. And I thought, man, there's just something about the banjo. I'd like to learn that. Of course, I didn't know there was any difference between a 5-string banjo or a 4-string.
Sure.
It was a banjo. I was about 11, 12 years old, and really took to it quickly just because it was just a happy sound, and it was different. It was unique.
Yeah, as you know, the public in general doesn't know the difference.
That's true.
That, I was the original tuba player with Banjo Mania.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I listened
time.
to a lot of your albums then.
and Doug Maddox used to bring all of his banjos with him on tour. And one day a lady walked up to him on stage and she says, "Why, how come you got all those banjos up there, young man?" He said, "Well, this is a tenor, and that's a 5-string, and that's." And he said, "Why aren't they just all banjos?" And that's when he went to the changeable tuning,
right,
on his 5-string, because he just said, it doesn't really matter that I have one of everything. It's just switch tuning, and he talks about the different styles. But
Right. Oh, he's great. I love Doug. He's awesome.
I spent a lot of time with this Mr. Doug Maddox. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, man.
yeah, they are cool. He's a cool guy and unbelievably talented. Of course, also plays mean tenor. He did most of the tenor recording on those albums, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. And
so
Steve
anyway,
used to play rhythm a lot on that. And yeah, of course, Brad, I mean, I've been listening to all those guys since I was a
they're
wee.
hacks. Oh no.
Yeah, really. That's funny.
No, as far as I'm concerned, Brad's probably the premier plectrum banjo player in the world.
Yeah,
He always has been in my eyes, and a very nice and humble man on top of it. So,
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's the
and
best.
his mom's a gas. You probably haven't met Beverly,
I
but
have not met Beverly, but I've heard. Yes.
and she's just absolutely fun. So I researched all of my interviews. Have you seen a couple of the interviews I've done this
Yeah.
far? I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that I like to find out things people don't want me to know, but I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But I know you spent some time, or you. When did you pick up string bass, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so I was playing tenor banjo a lot. We do stuff in, I did a little stint in Branson actually, and then play a lot of local gigs and stuff around the Houston area. But I knew, my mentor is a man named Buddy Wachter, and I learned a
Sure.
lot from him. So I have two buddies in my life. I have Buddy Griffin and then also Buddy Wachter, and of course he lives in Baltimore, the Baltimore area. And we never really had formal lessons because we lived so far away from each other, but we would meet at various banjo festivals and just talk over the phone and email at the time. So he said, if you want to make a living playing music, it's probably going to be smart to have another instrument that's a little more mainstream, And I said, yeah. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I don't know, because I've always just gravitated towards hearing root movement, hearing bass lines. And I thought maybe I should learn the bass. And he said, I think that'd be a great idea. So with his encouragement, I asked my high school if they would mind me learning double bass, and playing in the orchestra. And they said, would we, because they're all
Yeah.
having a hard time finding bass players, viola and bass. It's always
Well,
tough.
yeah, it's a scholarship city. It's kind of like French horns and tubas, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. So I took to it pretty quickly. I learned to read, bass clef, and luckily the principal in the orchestra helped me out. I was like, hey man, can you help me read these notes? And he penciled in the names of the notes over all of them. And I was just kind of faking it for a while. And one day the orchestra director found out, kind of embarrassed me in front of everybody. But I got the hang of it eventually. And I really was gonna go study at the University of North Texas the classical program with Jeff Braditich, who's a great bass teacher. But I started to pick up some gigs on bass around my senior year of high school. And I thought, North Texas is a great jazz school, so
Oh,
maybe
absolutely.
major in jazz and study with Lynn Seaton. So that's what I ended up doing. And
Yeah, when I was in college, of course, long before you were a twinkle in your dad's eye, probably. I actually spent a summer at North Texas.
oh, great.
Unbelievable jazz program.
Yeah.
They had I think they had 8 jazz bands going every week,
Mhm.
at least.
Yeah. 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 It was
And
probably North.
I had the fortunate advantage of sitting in a couple classes with Rich Matson's.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. So that really shaped my, um, path going forward. I was fortunate to make a lot of their lab bands and play those big bands. For people that don't know, they have a series of 9 big bands, and I got up to technically the 3 o'clock or the third highest one, or maybe even the 2 o'clock. But I had to. Well, I got an offer to play with a country musician named Ray Price.
oh yeah, sure.
I just decided, well, let's do it, because all my family being from Texas, I listened to that music a lot growing
Oh
up.
yeah.
So I auditioned for him, and he told me in his voice, son, you play terrific bass, pal. You can work for me as long as you want. I said, okay. I wasn't really planning on taking a hiatus from school, but it was a bass performance degree, and here's a chance to perform on bass and pay off my student loans. So I thought, well, I'll try it for a year, and then 8 years later, is
Absolutely. Well, you find out that really good bass players are fairly rare, although there are a lot of them out there.
Hmm. Hmm.
People who understand the styles and
Yes,
how to find tonics when you don't even know the song
exactly. That's
is the trick.
yeah, yeah. I learned really fast that, like that gig, for example, and it's a similar thing with all the trad jazz bands. You know, if you can just lay down good time, good notes, and stay out of the way until maybe you get the occasional solo, you'll get work. You know, it's not, you don't choose bass to be in the limelight. You're a function, a very important cogwheel in the band. You know, that needs to know its role. So I had no problem doing that because I had plenty of opportunities to be in the limelight playing tenor banjo when I wanted some of that. You know, I could show off doing the banjo stuff, but I just love, as I'm sure you do, the role of the bass player. You know,
Well, you actually kind of have control. Um,
yes, a lot of
you can make the front line look great, and you can make them sound terrible. Um,
yes, it's true.
as long as you get along with your drummer, you're normally okay. So,
Right. That's an important one. Yeah, for sure. So, you know, as I was touring with the country stuff, a lot of the musicians in that band, actually the fiddle player is a disciple of Joe Venuti and Stefan Grappelli and stuff. So we would play a lot of Django stuff and 20s tunes in the bus. I'd bring my tenor banjo and we would play on the bus when we're traveling. So I I played a lot of trad jazz music on the bus, and then we'd get off the bus and play traditional country music. And so,
a lot of the public in general don't understand the quality of the musicianship in those country bands. When I was with Banjo Mania, of course, we had a chance to play at Nashville at the Grand Ole Opry,
mhm.
and I got to hang out with a bunch of the real guys, and many of them are university educated and incredible musicians, and then they get on stage, and all of a sudden you think you're back at Hee Haw again, and I don't mean that in a demeaning manner. Is that they come off as such natural sit around the porch type of guys, and then you find out that half of them, spent their 10 year in college playing Mahler.
Right. It's true. It's true. And they all have tremendous ears and they're usually great readers. I mean, and they have their own hieroglyphics we read, the Nashville number
Oh
system.
yeah,
You have to know, I mean, even with Ray, there's a book, and most of it was written out in bass clef, the bass parts, bass lines. And if for that style, it's a Texas shuffle style that Ray really kind of invented. So you double the piano, the upright bass, and sometimes even what we call a tic-tac bass, which is like a baritone guitar. All
hmm
three are playing basically the same triad parts. And it really grooves, it really swings hard in a way that country can swing. It's hard to describe.
no, I understand.
Yeah, yeah. So, but once again, just being in the mindset. Let's try to, for me, I was telling myself every night, let's sound like the record. Try to sound like the record. Try to just be exactly what he wants, and everything will be okay. And that's how it was. But I tried to carry that same mindset over. Like I was fortunate enough to play with Jim Cullum for a while. I played bass for him.
How long did
And
you play with the
about
Riverwalk band?
about a year and a half or so. It was tough because I was still playing with Ray. So, but Ray was kind of slowing down. I had moved to San Antonio from the Dallas area. I was working with a lot of local musicians playing, more 50s, 60s style bop kind of jazz too.
Sure.
But I knew all these old tunes from the banjo. A lot of the weird, I'm not trying to
Right.
toot my own horn, but I think he was surprised when I would sit in. He'd call, Mississippi Mud, and I was like, "Oh, great! I love this tune," and know the verse and all this stuff because you play those in the tenor banjo
Right.
world.
Well, it's not so many people that know the canary has rings under his eyes. It's
Exactly, exactly. So I really enjoyed it, man. And at that time, it was still the full band. I mean, we were playing, Howard Elkins and John Sheridan and Benji Bohannon was playing drums at the time, and Mike Pitsley, Kenny Rupp, Vache would sit in with us. Alan Vache would sit in with us sometimes, and
I know
it was
Evan
great.
Christopher went through there.
Yes. Now he's a monster. I wasn't. He was. I never got to play with him. I don't think. But all those guys, it's just
Sure.
Randy Reinhardt. I mean, guys would sit in all the time. Great musicians. So that was a blast. And of course, with him, it's all we all play by ear. So it's quite an education too. Just to as many tunes as I knew, there's a lot more
Oh yeah.
to learn. And those guys, I still talk to Howard and John pretty regularly. They're terrific musicians and great guys. It's fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, the dirty secret behind jazz and almost any of those styles of music is that you maybe have 4 or 5, maybe 6 root songs, and the rest of them you can sort of pick up if you like have like Honeysuckle Rose and a 12-bar blues and Ain't Misbehaving, and there are a few of those that the cycles copy themselves onto other tunes all the time. And if you're not careful, as we all know, you can end up in the wrong bridge all the time.
Oh yeah, you gotta be careful you don't start daydreaming and
Oh gosh, I love it when it happens, especially when you're doing with an all-star set and you look at each other and you what were we playing again? No, somebody's in the middle of a solo or bridge.
Right. Oh man, I know. And luckily for me too, with Jim, when I was playing with them, it was like Howard and I were good friends because we have the banjo connection, the tenor guitar thing. And so he was so cool with me. If I didn't know a song, I'd say, hey, what does the bridge do? What is the verse? And he would just quickly kind of spat it out and help me along. And that was nice, but yeah, and Mike Pitsley too. Mike Pitsley, great trombone player. He still works with us. I'm in kind of well, if you can imagine, I'm the oldest, if not tied for the oldest member of a trad jazz band here called the Dirty River Jazz Band. And the core group, they're all in their 20s, and I'm 34. But Pitsley will sit in sometimes with us and play.
Over the hill, Tyler.
I know, man. I'm gray hair, but having Mike Pitsley sit in, and so it just having that kind of level of professionalism too. It's just so much fun.
One of my favorite things about early jazz, Dixieland or trad jazz, whatever you would like to call it, is the fact that I'm 64 now, and quite a few of the circles I'm in, I'm still a young guy.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah.
You have to be a kid for a while. Now, you're actually the exact same age as my son, Aaron, who's been helping communicate for all of this stuff.
Great, man. Yeah,
but,
awesome.
So, yeah, I'm familiar with your age group, sir.
Yes, we're kind of the last of the breed, I say, because we still, I still remember, I grew up without the internet from day one. We had cassettes and records. CD was a big deal when we got a CD player. So I think we're kind of at the tail end of that. Pagers. We didn't have cell phones. Tape a quarter. Pagers. So I could use a payphone. Yeah. So I do remember all that. But it's funny, man, because just a few years younger than me and your son, and it's a totally different world. They grew up in a totally different world.
What drives me the craziest is the access they have to good music.
Oh my gosh, I know. Oh man, I wish.
You being a teacher with students, because I taught at the high school level for a very long time, it drives you crazy. Because I remember what we had to go through to hear these jazz greats. Sometimes listen to 78s.
Yes.
Sometimes, convince somebody to drag out whatever wire recordings, and now all they have to do is hit a button on their computer, and you still can't get them to listen to Eddie Peabody or to Harry Reese or to.
Right, I know, and I mean, I broke a lot of cassette tapes, records. Trying to slow things down. You have to slow it down, and then the pitch is weird, and you got to detune your banjo to match the pitch. All that stuff. And I have a theory. Maybe this is wrong, but I almost think because the work was so hard. I mean, you really had to commit to it. When I was trying to transcribe or rip off a solo, I mean, it was a project. And now it's almost like if you go on YouTube and all these other things, Spotify, whatever they're listening to on, it's almost just, there's so much, it's almost like maybe they get lost and just, there's a lot of distractions and stuff.
I know it's not the same for banjo players, but for band instruments, for the front line and stuff, you can find transcriptions of almost everything now. I remember trying to pull Louis Armstrong solos off, and now all you have to do is hit, as I went West End Blues, Louis Armstrong, and sheet music will pop up. It's like,
that wasn't there. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I really do. It's a blessing and a curse. And all these there's some great slow down software, that you can get and change the pitch and all that.
Right.
Which is great. I was actually just having this talk with a student of mine, Morris Moon, and we were just talking. He's a great banjo player. We're talking about how a lot of those old banjo recordings, the 78s, even wax cylinders, they were recorded. When you listen to them, they're a little bit sharp, and you hear Reese or any of these guys. Of course, they're playing super fast, but a lot of that too is the speed of the master was a little bit higher. Plus, and this is a big debate, but A wasn't always 440 back then, it was a little lower. So if you combine those two together, there's quite a bit of a speed increase on those old records.
Brad actually told me that Eddie Peabody actually used to tune his banjo up a whole step, so it would crack. Now, when you're a tuba player playing with a banjo player that does that,
right?
I tell you that thank goodness I played a long time as a trumpet player in Latin bands.
Right.
I could play in sharps.
Sharp keys.
But because Brad would do that on some of the tunes that we recorded, and I'd say, what? He'd go, oh no, I forgot to tell you, I tuned up a whole step because I wanted to. Oh,
that's fascinating to me, and it affects everything because people will reference, Peabody, for example, his string gauges, and copy them, but they'll be tuning in C, concert, C.
Right.
Those string gauges are relative to D, and so they're a lot floppier. And it's like Stevie Ray Vaughan with the blues crowd. They'll put on string gauges, but he's an E flat. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It's kind of funny how merry some people can get to that type of thing. There was a trumpet player, a famous story is this dentist in Colorado wanted to sound like Bix. So he found Bix's dental x-rays and tried to get somebody to alter his face to match. We're talking about an extreme example here, but that's kind of like the string gauge thing, kind of.
I do not. Nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to that gearheads. They'll do anything. Picks and strings and what sort of cologne did he use? Maybe that will help.
Well, since we're going down this path, what banjo do you play?
I play. My favorite modern banjo that I use for a lot of my gigs is the Ohm company out of Boulder.
Howard Alden is a
Ohm exactly.
Component.
I love that, and then of course my favorite. I have about 4 here that I use.
And Cynthia Sayre uses Ohm, I think.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's great, in my opinion, just a great modern company. Now, a very dear friend of mine named Vinny Mondello, he lives in the Austin area. He made me a beautiful custom banjo. I actually have it right here. And this is one I play. I love this banjo. It's kind of got a blue sunburst.
That's a fairly deep resonator, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit deeper than it's not quite like a Vox, but it's a little thicker than a normal Gibson. But he made this for me, and I love this banjo. Of course, I use calfskin heads on a lot of mine, kind of like Brad. He's done that for a while.
Yeah.
But, I'm also a huge Vega Vox fan. As far as vintage banjos go, I have 3 or 4 of them back there, and I love that sound. It's those are
definitely different than the Ohm, though. The Ohm's got kind of a warmer, gentler sound compared to a Vox, especially.
Yeah. You can, and there's so much you can do with setup. But yes, what I like about the Ohm is it is a very modern sound. It's real clean and real pure. It's just a real easy. It records easily. The Vox is it's more like a hot rod or something.
But you've got to be a bit of a masochist to still be using calfskin.
Yes, especially in Texas when it's when the weather changes.
Right, or if you're in a studio with the lights.
Oh yeah.
Everybody wonders why the banjo player has a jug of water and a rag next to him.
Yep.
But
that's true.
I played with drummers who do calfskin too, and boy, that's a commitment.
Big time, especially drums. You have all the I love the sound, and there's a part of me that thinks, acoustically, back in the 20s, all the innovation, all the construction techniques were developed around the soundboard, which is calfskin, and it's a totally different material than plastic. So I think once I went down that path, it was just hard to get off it. You get used to it, you get used to the sound, the feel, it feels different. So I don't know, but yeah, call me crazy. I'm a little crazy because it's
the only real disadvantage, of course, is the time that it takes to mount, and the fact that you can't run down to a local music store and get a replacement if you crack one open.
That is, yeah, you definitely know your stuff because that is that's the truth. It's kind of like gut strings. I use gut strings on one of my basses, and it's kind of a similar thing with that.
Oh God, I've got to tell you, I
Uh,
played string bass for a little bit for about 3 years until I realized that hauling both a tuba and a string bass was stupid.
yeah.
But I went to a music store once and there was a brand new kid at the counter and nobody else in the store. And I asked for a set of strings, a new set of strings for my upright. And all he knew is that they were doing a big discount on bass strings. And it was the electric bass strings that were on sale.
Ooh,
And I got a set of acoustic strings
ooh.
at like $20.
Oh my God! Wow, that's a deal. Yeah,
And
that's
and I
awesome.
didn't and I didn't tell him. But anyway,
Well, that's how it goes.
right.
Yeah, yeah, bass strings. Gosh, what are they? $100 a string or so?
At
I mean, they're
least, yeah.
so expensive, man. Yeah, it's but I go back and forth because I love gut. Like with Jim, I always played gut strings and acoustic, no amp, no amplification, and I don't do much of the really fancy rockabilly slapping, but I'll do like a Milt Hinton kind of slap,
Sure.
single kind of thing, and occasional little skip beats and stuff. But that sound, it's just a great sound. But if I'm playing more bowed stuff and all that, I'll use steel strings or a hybrid kind of a synthetic string.
Well, the difference comes up mostly, I think, at least for me, the difference comes in the immediacy of the attack and the sharpness of the attack.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you have a, if somebody was to ask you, tell you could only play either tenor banjo or string bass?
Ooh.
And
That's a hard one.
I know it's a terrible question to ask. It's
Well, no, it's a
something
good.
interviewers do.
I'd probably say tenor banjo. I probably would have to go there, uh, but it's tough, man. That'd be a tough one. If I was on a deserted island or whatever, and I could only have one, it would probably have to be tenor banjo.
Well,
Unfortunately,
yeah, I think a desert island, I think that would be a good choice. As
yeah.
long as it didn't have a skinhead on a desert
Oh,
island.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I don't know. Depends what animals are there. Maybe I could skin one myself. No,
Oh, I
no,
wonder
that's
how,
fun.
I wonder how fish, no, never mind.
Yeah. You never know. That's a good point. It's funny.
So great. And I always used to get asked this question. If I had to limit myself to one genre or to
Mm.
one era of jazz, what would it be? How about yourself? You have an era that you enjoy?
I do love trad jazz, 20s to 30s era. That's real fun for me. I just love the energy. I love uh, as much as I love playing, 50s and 60s bop, beat bebop and stuff. I think the 20 when it's played right with the right groove and the right people, it can swing so hard, man. Some of that two beat stuff and even the four beat. It just yeah, I love that genre.
Well, I do as well. Although I have to say that in my absolutely perfect world, if I had no physical limitations and other things, I would probably be playing jazz trumpet in a smoky lounge that played 30s and 40s standards.
Yeah,
But
that'd be
I
nice.
wish this isn't a bad place to be if you can stand the cigarette smoke. But
That's no, it's true. Isn't that funny? That's another thing. Speaking of I was talking about my generation. That's something else that I mean, up until fairly recent, well, maybe around 10 years ago, maybe. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. All the clubs that I played at were smoking. I mean, that used to be a thing. Always taking my suit to the dry cleaners, and it would stink up my car and my closet, my house, and it's
oh
funny.
yeah.
I kind of forget about that sometimes. Gosh, I don't even know the last time.
Well, I'd come home from a gig and my wife wouldn't let me get into bed unless I took a shower.
Yep,
Just
I know, man. Because yeah, but that used to be a regular thing. I mean, that was just part of the gig.
it's funny. Yeah, I did some touring over in the UK
Hmm.
when I was younger, and my kids came with me on it. And so one time we were out here in Southern California looking for an English pub experience with my son,
Hmm.
and we found a great place and it had perfect food, but it didn't have the nicotine on the walls. It didn't feel right. It just you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying. There's a place, the Lion and Rose pub, I used to go to a lot here in San Antonio that up until just about 2 years ago, I think it finally closed down. But you could go there and get a pint, Guinness or whatever, fish and chips, shepherd's pie, and everybody was still smoking in there, which is crazy. But I didn't. But I I have to admit, I kind of it's kind of neat. There's kind of a nostalgia to it and an authentic, nature to that.
It's being part of the flavor of the
Yeah,
food. I mean, it's just part of the environment. And I no,
yeah,
I was a longtime asthmatic as a kid, and my mother was a chain smoker.
yeah.
So I mean, not that we have to get into that area,
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's just that you sort of it becomes part of your experience or part of your
yes,
memory.
it is.
What I'm
Yeah,
trying to say.
definitely. And there's something about a jazz club. First, it's usually smoky, but now it's not, and it just feels different. It's just a different vibe.
I also was talking to some of my Dixieland friends. We looked at each other on a stage at a performance about a year ago and said, "You remember when we all had beer on stage?
Yeah.
Because now we all have Diet Cokes on stage,
Right, Diet Coke. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
or sparkling water or something."
right, right, right. Yeah, vegan. Yeah, chips. Yeah, no, it's different for sure. And it's the same thing with the country bands. And like Ray Price and stuff. I mean, gosh, we'd play in some honky tonks, dance halls, and stuff that people are throwing beer bottles at you. It's you got the chicken wire in front of you. I've only done
Are you
that.
doing some country swing stuff too?
Yes, so I have done some of that with some groups around a lot of the Western swing. It's funny because they're as different as the genres are. They're all kind of related in a way.
Yeah,
Because a lot of like Bob Wills, for example, all that. Um, the Western swing was kind of just jazz, but there's a little Texas flair to it. They had a horn section. They had, tenor banjo, upright bass, archtop guitar. A lot of
it's
it.
fun. I was just interviewing Danny Coots earlier,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and he and I had the same discussion
Oh, okay. Yeah.
about the funny triangle between trad, country swing, and Hawaiian.
Yeah, in Hawaii, exactly,
You know,
exactly. Very similar. Yeah. In fact, I do a camp. Well, we're crossing our fingers that maybe we can do it next year. We'll see. But it's the Red Hot String Camp with Matt Munisteri. He heads that up, and the premise for that is it's a camp that focuses on music of the 20s and 30s, but it's not hot club Django stuff.
right?
And there's no horns. It's just string players. But they do, and it's not just jazz. It's just any popular music from the 20s. So there's Hawaiian
Sure.
stuff. There's Western swing. There is a fair amount of jazz and pop stuff from the 20s. So, but that's been a blast, to be a part of that. So
Yeah, we had made an aside towards the popularity of the ukulele in the 20s. Of course, banjo was another. It was the equivalent of what electric guitar players are now at the time, and that's really funny. I used to teach quite a few classes on early jazz at the high school and university levels, and I would start out the lecture by saying, a bunch of kids got together, tried to find the most offensive lyrics they could find to piss off their parents, and played the loudest instruments they could find.
right.
Does anybody know what that's called? Rock and roll. No, that's called Dixieland.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that true? I mean, that's hilarious that you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it was. Yeah, banjo players. I mean, yeah, as you just said, for people watching that don't know, I mean, one of the reasons it was so popular is because you could hear it, in a band. You couldn't hear unamplified guitar very well, and the guitars that were being made were being made to be as loud as possible, and big heavy strings, arch tops. And then eventually, with the invention of better amplification and stuff,
Yeah.
the banjo kind of fell out of popularity.
I think tenor banjo in particular is interesting with its history. It's tracing back to Skiffle and UK in some cases, and in
Germany,
some cases they were just viola players who were trying to find work
right?
when they came out of the sweet bands into hot bands,
Exactly.
and ta-da.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't know that about tenor banjo or banjos in general, how that all came about. I
Yeah.
was watching a couple of your videos
Mhm.
right before I came on the air with you, just because I wanted to get an idea of what you were doing. And you're actually pretty brave when it comes to playing tenor. I mean, See, I'm one of the few people who understand the plectrum was designed for chord melodies and tenor was more designed for single note.
That's right.
And
Right.
you have a good grasp on playing chorded solos.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'm It's funny you mentioned that because I try to tell people a lot. I was fascinated with the plectrum sound. A lot of the players I was influenced by were plectrum players. Eddie Peabody, Perry Bechtel, Buddy Wachter, but and Buddy plays tenor too. I mean,
Oh
but
yeah,
the albums were mainly plectrum, and the chord voicings are so lush, and the intervals are tighter. Get those thirds and stuff. And I was always trying to imitate that sound. So a lot of times, what I'll do is do 3-string chords and not use all 4 strings, and some fingerings that are maybe kind of crazy looking, but they give me closer harmonies to
uh-huh. Yeah, I found that really interesting. Watching you play, I know way too much about this for a tuba player, but that's what you get for spending 6 years with Banjo Mania.
Banjo Mania, right.
Um, so I find all of that fascinating, and because I spent some time on Finale and on music software and try to imitate some certain sounds, trying to imitate a banjo sound, I went through and I tried to imitate the tunings when I pick out the chord voicings,
Right.
and I find it all really fascinating.
Yes.
How it changes the effect of the sound.
Right. Well, this brings up another interesting point. And I'm 99% sure this is true, but if it's not, forgive me if anybody corrects me on this. But I think it's out there on the official, Freddie Green website. But the theory is that how Freddie came up with his chord voicings, he was a tenor banjo player.
Right. Inside 4, correct.
Right. And in the old days, for people that don't know, there were no letter names for chords that you read stack notation, just like a piano or whatever would read. So when you're given a chord chart, when you saw a C major chord, it'd be C, E, G, but for plectrum, it'd be nice and tight and stacked. And for tenor, it could be, C, G, E, C. It's this huge range. Right. So Freddie Green was used to playing this way, and then when he got his guitar, he literally was just reading the old banjo sheet music that he already had. And lo and behold, when you put that on a guitar fretboard, you have to skip over strings, and you get these little intervals that are actually more similar to a tenor tuning, a fifths tuning. I just found that fascinating.
I didn't realize that was how he came about that. I know as a jazz educator that when I told my guitarist about the inside 4, that you hear this giant sigh of relief that they're not trying to cover all 6 strings all the time.
Right.
If nothing else.
Exactly.
But it makes a lot of sense. And of course, I also find it fascinating. Freddie Green always refused to take a solo.
Right.
He enjoyed doing just what he was doing,
Oh, the best. In fact, I got a book. I just started it. It's called Rhythm is My Beat, and it's all about Freddie Green. And I just started it, so but it looks fascinating. It's a newer book, I think, put out by his family, maybe his son or something, or a grandson. I don't know. Anyways, but it looks pretty interesting because a lot of it is straight from Freddie's mouth, and I've always been fascinated with him, just the way he drove the band and held it down. And
one thing I'm going to ask you a question from a layman's perspective here.
Yeah, sure.
Which is, how do you remember the difference in chord positions for all the different fretted instruments you play?
That's, I get that question a lot because I do play 6-string guitar a little bit, enough. Freddie Green rhythm is kind of what I like to do. I solo a little bit. I do play plectrum tuning. I do play tenor. I play mandolin. I play upright bass, all that stuff, and ukulele. And it's almost like, for me personally, and everybody's different, but for me, I always have this internal ear going where I'm hearing chord movement and melody, and it's like, depending on what instrument's in my hand, all those, hundreds, if not thousands of hours of practice just kind of gel, and I don't even think about what instrument's in my hand. My ear just kind of adjusts to the tuning and shapes. I'm pretty visual, honestly. I think a lot more people are than they might even admit, but I see a lot of shapes on the fingerboard, and sometimes I don't even think about note names or theory. You just know this shape makes this sound, and on certain instruments you almost memorize those shapes, and you don't think about it much. And that's when you know you're getting, I tell my students, that's when you know you're starting to really get it, is when you're not actively thinking about this stuff as much. It's sort of permeated your subconscious, and you're speaking through the instrument as if it's just an extra limb or something. It's just there, and you don't have to think as much. So
You may appreciate when I interviewed Howard Alden,
yeah.
you talked about the fact that he went from 4-string to 6-string to 7-string.
Mhm.
So of course, the obvious question to me was, what is it you have against 5-string?
Yeah. Oh, I love
I got to
Howard.
check all of them on that, but then,
Yeah, yeah. I was fortunate enough to do some projects with him the last a few years, and we've had a lot of fun. We did this thing called the Banjo Summit with Rob Wright, Howard Alden out in Arizona, and it's been a blast. We did a CD together, and it's a lot of fun. If people are interested, they can check that out online. It
yeah, there are
was
a lot of people who don't understand what a fine tenor player Howard is.
oh, he's the best. He's amazing. I mean, he's just incredible.
I was fortunate. Actually, he was the very first banjo player I ever toured with.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun. I tell the story that the first players I ever played with in the style were Howard Alden and Brad Roth. And what do you do after that?
Yeah. There's nowhere to go but down, huh?
Just you get into one of the jazz club situation or something. You go, really? Is this? But all the banjo players I know, anyway.
It's true. I mean, there's so many great guys. I mean, I enjoy playing with anybody that really takes the instrument seriously and really commits. Cynthia. I mean, there's so many. I can't even name them. There's just great ones that I've been fortunate enough to be around over the years. And the fun thing about the 4-string banjo, tenor and plectrum, is that the little festivals, although they're declining just because the average age is declining, and we probably won't have them like we used to have them. It's almost like a family reunion, like a lot of the Tradjaz festivals are too. But it's more than just the music and more than the instrument. It really is a family social.
Oh yeah,
thing.
I had a chance to play a couple of 5 conventions.
Yeah,
and I understand. Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, people at first. I mean, I've had some family members, and even before she was my wife, my wife would come, and she's a classically trained, flutist and great musician. And I said, I have to warn you, when you go to these festivals, it's kind of like the comic strip, The Definition of Hell. You're going to walk in there, and there's hundreds and hundreds of banjo players. But if you give it a chance, I promise you, by the end of it, you'll want to go back because it's so much fun. And every one of them says the same thing. They love it,
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting about the banjo conventions and concerts is the fact that not only do you have all kinds of banjo performers, but just about everybody in the audience is also a player.
Right.
I mean, a good majority. It's not the same with the Tradjaz Festival or with other types of things where you have people that are purely audience that love this style. Normally, everybody has a banjo in their house.
That's funny.
Those things.
And that brings up another good point, because I had to get over stage fright really fast when I was a kid playing at banjo festivals, because everybody in the crowd was a banjo player, and they knew everything I was doing, and so once you get used to that, everything else is easy playing in front of non-banjo players.
Well, that's very true. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to start wrapping things up here.
Sure.
But I want to give you time, and now we have enough time that you're allowed to plug anything you want. You have CDs for sale. Do you have a method book? Do you want some more private students? What would you like?
So actually, I do have a few slots left. Almost everything is on my website. So my website's TylerJacksonMusic, all one word, .com. So www.tylerjacksonmusic.com, and I have CDs for sale there, and information about lessons. I'm doing a lot of virtual lessons. I still have a few slots that I can cram in. So yeah, I mean, if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out there. I'm on Facebook, and I have a little fan page, and I like to.
Are you still accepting jobs on bass?
Yes, I'm actually doing some projects right now, a long distance. I thankfully had the foresight enough to invest in some pretty good quality preamps and mics and stuff, and I have a nice studio out here. This is actually separate from my house, and so I can play at any hour and not piss off the neighbors.
Yeah, you're not like me. This is fake. But that's
well, I was going to say you have a beautiful studio, but yeah, that's great. But I do a lot of sessions, a lot of tracking for people, and I enjoy that a lot. So
excellent. Are you playing any electric, or you try to stay away from that?
I do play some electric. I'm a big fan. I'm just a vintage kind of guy. I like I've got an old Fender P bass with foam under the bridge, and
Me too.
I like the Motown thing. I like the old 50. I like that sound. The flat wounds. Got the labella flat wounds.
So let's list here what you're available to play for the people who are looking to hire you. So,
Yeah,
So ukulele,
ukulele. Yeah,
tenor banjo,
tenor banjo. I do a bit of guitar, bass, upright, and electric. Mandolin. I do some of that.
okay.
A lot of stuff, really. I like to be kind of although my passion is definitely trad jazz, tenor banjo, jazz, bass. I'm kind of a chameleon. I found out a long time ago you got to pay the bills, and the more styles you can play authentically and accurately, the better off you're going to be financially. So
Yeah, I usually I tell people at the beginning of the show that the name trad jazz is only a hook. Although, and it stands for traditional, not for 1950s British jazz revivalist.
right.
Because some people take exception to the fact that I'm using that as a title. They say, "Well, I'm not really a trad player." I go, "That's really not the point of the show."
Right. It's just a hook that, I got it. Yeah.
But so anything you're available to play in any style that you're available to play, and it's nice to meet you. I hope that someday we can end up on the same stage.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Well, we will. That'll be fun.
And I'll try to upstage you every time. No.
Hey, I wouldn't have it any other way. That's good.
Take your time. I'm going to log off, and so kind of you to do this. So you take care.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for being had.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan posts new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.